Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by Moo, an online print and design company that helps you stand out from the crowd. Moo creates premium quality, customizable business cards and promotional materials. Visit moo.com/twist for more details and to get 20% off your next order. And by PagerDuty, serving as the hub of your operations, aggregating all of your infrastructure, monitoring tools, and alerting the right people and teams at the right time. Sign up today at pagerduty.com/twist. to get a free t-shirt when you get your first alert. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services startup program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate. This special bonus episode of This Week in Startups features Jason as part of an Edelman panel. The burning question, is journalism being compromised by technology and the relentless drive for click-through rates? Or is technology opening new opportunities and enabling a new era for quality journalism? As always, he is at Jason and we are at TWI Startups on Twitter and Instagram.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money and defeat you.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Jason, for the shush. Everyone, come on in. I'm Reese Ryan. I'm with Edelman here in the Bay Area. Just wanted to say thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate everyone coming out when there's a Giants game on. I won't tell you the score. You can Google that yourself. But really excited to be here. And I just wanted to quickly give a special thank you to our panel. We have Dave Callaway here. We have Pui-Wing Tam, Amir Efrati, Evan Hansen, and Jason Calacanis. And we're really excited to have them. For us at Edelman here in the Bay Area, we think this is a really important topic for conversation, given the way the Bay Area has led the changes in the media in the last 10 to 20 years. So we think that we've got a really well-qualified panel here to talk about it. So I'm personally really excited. So I'm not going to talk. I'm going to leave that to Dave to moderate the discussion here. But I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming. And on behalf of Edelman San Francisco, Edelman in Silicon Valley, and Sacramento, thanks everyone for coming down. And I'll leave it to you guys. Hopefully we'll have a chance in the second half of the session for some audience Q&A. So just wait for that. Thanks, Dave.
All right, great. Thanks, Reese. Mike working? Good. Okay, great. Good to have everybody here. Thanks for coming. Like he said, I understand there is another event in town tonight. So I appreciate you all coming here, and I can assure you that the hundreds of thousands of people who are watching the other event don't know what they're missing here. We've got some great panelists here. Looking forward to hearing more. Hello, Jason.
You need the microphone.
You think I need it?
Only because it's going to come up on the camera.
I got a lapel mic.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right.
I was afraid it wasn't going to get recorded. Sorry.
That's all right. I think we should be just fine. Anyway, Jason needs no introduction. He is a part-time lounge singer, as you heard before. Also a serial entrepreneur and angel investor. He created Silicon Alley Reporter, Inside.com, and Gadget Launch, and was an early investor in Uber, Thumbtack, and about 75 other startups. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come join us.
It's my pleasure.
Next to Jason is Evan Hansen. Evan's a senior editor at Medium.com, a new content platform that's changing the way that people write and read online by encouraging and rewarding high-quality writing. Evan joined Medium following 8 years as editor-in-chief of Wired.com. Thanks for joining us, Evan.
Thanks for having me.
Next to Evan is Amir Efrati, a colleague of mine from my old days here in San Francisco when I was the editor-in-chief of MarketWatch. Amir was at the Wall Street Journal. He's now a senior writer at The Information, Jessica Lesson's high technology group, and they're doing great work as far as I can see, when I can see. When you get behind that paywall. And Amir's comments are all off the record.
You can use my password.
Next to Next to Amir is Pui-Wing Tam, another great colleague of mine from the old days at the Wall Street Journal. She left about 18 months ago to become U.S. tech editor at Bloomberg News, running all of their technology coverage in Silicon Valley and across the country. So thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Evan, let me start with you. I'm interested in Medium.com. We were talking about, the new type of platform by encouraging great writing. Do people really even care about great writing anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the things that we see with the way the internet's organized these days, the incentives are a little bit off in terms of how we reward that. It costs a lot of money to do deep investigative reporting. It doesn't find a huge audience all the time. And we've developed to a kind of a metric for valuation around clicks, which we don't think is really a very valid measurement. So we're trying to rethink that. We're looking at engagement in terms of time spent with stories, and we're actually starting to sell time to advertisers. So the deeper the story is, the longer people spend with it, the more that value that story might bring. So it's very experimental at this point, but we're starting to see some traction. There's advertiser sponsors, people with money who are interested in underwriting that kind of content. And we think a new kind of platform, a new approach has a place for that.
So Amir, it tends to go against the prevailing wisdom that people don't have enough time to engage with long-form journalism these days. And yet we see at USA Today, people are engaging. Evan's obviously seeing that. What do you think?
Hey, can I ask a question about Medium? Because I'm very fascinated by what you're doing, and I want to have a better understanding. I think everyone here wants to have a better understanding. So you're obviously a platform for all kinds of long-tail content, democratizing, storytelling and so forth. But you're also hiring veteran journalists and putting together different verticals of content. What's your model? I mean, are you trying to be like a YouTube, if you will, where you have kind of core top stars that drive a lot of engagement, and that sort of feeds into everything else as you have long-tail content coming in? I mean, is that a valuable analogy?
We do sort of internally talk about YouTube as a great model for, building a platform that has, it's an open platform. Anyone can contribute, and they've built a model for people to make money on it, whether or not they're happy with the money they're making. But we do think that they own attention on video, and once you have that kind of scale, it's a really good opportunity to start to monetize off of that. Writing is a much kind of bigger and much more diverse and much more distributed kind of activity, and no one owns writing. It's a little bit ambitious to say we're going to own writing, but we feel if you can build a scale of contributors and readers, that's going to pay off in a place where people are going to go where the attention is. So we have two different ways of thinking about what we're doing. The first is a platform, the open platform where anyone can contribute, and the second is, as you mentioned, we're building branded publications on top of Medium. There's two different monetization schemes for this. So the platform can be monetized with premium kind of data, services, all kinds of stuff we haven't dreamed up yet. The publications can be monetized today with sponsorships. And we've actually done our first one with BMW. It's a publication called Reform. We hired Sarah Rich, who's a former senior editor at Dwell magazine. It's an independent publication that's underwritten by BMW. That model seems to be something that's attractive to people who are trying to move into a different way of communicating with their engaging with their marketing needs. So publishing is its own distinct kind of unit, and we're building several of these. We have a music one called Q Point. We have a political cartooning one called The Nib, and we have several other ones that we're running on sports and just kind of human interest stuff. Those are all underwritten, funded by us. And our idea is that those eventually might be able to attract their own revenue streams using very standard kind of advertising kind of model. The platform is still kind of a green field for us. We haven't tried to monetize that. We're not really thinking about, what are we going to offer to contributors in terms of, a way for them to put paywalls or create fan-based funding, around their contributions. Those things may come, but that's a little early for us. For now, the monetization is focused on the publications. platform is still kind of open.
Do they feed each other?
Hey everybody, I'm thrilled that Moo.com is a sponsor of This Week in Startups. Why am I so thrilled? Because I've loved this product and used this product for many years. Back in Weblogs Inc. days when we were doing Engadget and Autoblog, everybody wanted cards, right? Everybody wants to be able to go to CES or an event and give a card out. It's one of those things that makes employees feel proud. And as an owner of a business, you want people to feel proud. You want them to represent your company. Even the person who's the receptionist or cleaning the kitchen or whatever you think is like the lowest person on the totem pole, they deserve to represent the company. They deserve to have a Moo card. And these Moo cards are so affordable and so easy to make with their online editor, Moo.com. And you know these cards because you've been at an event where somebody opened a cute little like chiclet-sized box and they slid it open and pulled out this little thin card that was on beautiful paper stock and they handed it to you and you're like, oh, that's so impressive and I love your cute little card holder that you put in your pocket and you put in your bag and it doesn't crush the cards, right? Moo.com is just brilliant, simple, elegant business cards. Plus they do a bunch of other stuff that you need like stationery. But the business cards are super easy, and you can get them like in a day or two, or even overnight, I think. They're so amazing with customer service. Go to moo.com/twist, moo.com/twist. Right now, design your cards, and you're going to get 20% off, which is, I don't even want them to give you the 20% off because I kind of feel like it's too cheap already. This product is amazing. I use it. Everybody who uses it loves it. You've seen them before. And you can get full-size cards, too, if you don't want to be like super hip and avant-garde and you want like a regular full card, you know, on bone white, you know, classic paper. You can do that too. But go to moo.com/twist. Please go to moo.com/twist. Great paper, great aesthetic. You can do all this online. You have the online WYSIWYG kind of jam. And it's just a great product. I'm super, super stoked because me talking to you about moo.com is like, this is what I would tell you. If a friend came up to me at a dinner and said, hey, I need to get business cards. I like your business cards. I'd be like, yeah, go to moo.com. Boom. And you know what's interesting? We used to make them specific for events. So when we would go to, when Engadget would go to things like CES, we would make it and say, you know, visit our site, ces.engadget.com, right? Or engadget.com/CES, whatever it was, just to sort of like highlight the actual events coverage. So you could make these cards for specific events. You could put the event name on the back or like the date of your party. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with them, like on an ad hoc basis. And I think that's super savvy. So anyway, moo.com, and everybody thank @Moo on your Twitter handle. Let's get back to this amazing episode.
I mean, do they both need to, can one exist without the other?
Well, I think there's a flywheel effect. You know, I mean, I think one of the things that happens when you invest in professional content, you invest in professional writing, it tends to be of a higher quality. That tends to attract attention. People who are paying attention to those writers, other writers get, their ears prick up and they say, hey, this is something I want to participate with. So finding that stuff attracts, it becomes a magnet for talent and higher quality stuff. That in turn attracts other people who say, all right, I want to read the site, and eventually some of those people may want to decide that they're aspirational and they say, I'm going to write as well. We think it feeds back on itself, and that great writing attracts great writing. You create models of behavior in community-based and platform-based tools. Those models are the ones that people tend to replicate. And if you get in early with great models, people replicate those models, and that's what we're hoping is going to happen.
Jason, you've seen a bunch of models out there and helped create a bunch of models. What do you think is working right now in terms of news media?
Well, it's the golden age. There's never been more activity, more writing, and more reading and consumption going on. So whenever you have this kind of massive spike, it's very confusing for people. And a bunch of people think, oh my God, it's ending. It's the worst thing ever. And then a bunch of people think, oh my God, there's so much opportunity here. I haven't seen this many swings at bat and people trying new creative things since the height of the dot-com bubble. And in the earlier 90s, the zine movement, right? So if you look at both of those, they were both about alternative voices and alternative platforms. For a zine, it was making photocopies, right? And sneaking them into Tower Records and mailing them to people. And then in the web, it was the web, right? 1.0. And now you have mobile and you have platforms. So full disclosure, I'm an investor in Medium, a small one. And I think that's a perfect example of somebody saying, hey, the platform is important, the content's important, and then who's writing is important. And just try and figure out how to hit some level of scale and have some excellence on all those levels, because content management systems, they change very slowly, but they're very important. So when we did Weblogs Inc., Engadget, Autoblog, Joystick, we built our own. We wouldn't use movable type. WordPress was just getting started, and it was this kid like Matt Mullenweg who was like 18 years old, and it was like, you know, we couldn't trust an 18-year-old with our publishing business, so we built our own. That was why we kicked Denton's ass when we went head-to-head with him with Engadget and Gizmodo and Autoblogging and Joystick and Kotaku and everything, because we had a better publishing system, right? So now people realize the tools matter. And what Evan, I believe, is doing right now with Medium, and I don't know that he would describe it this way, is it's Blogger with a budget. It's Blogger with an editorial perspective. And he has done so much in terms of the four publishing platforms he built: Blogger, Odeo, Twitter, and now Medium. And one of the key moments, I think, at Twitter was when the celebrities came on board. And in fact, when I was living in LA, I told him, Evan, you know, if we get Perez Hilton to join Twitter, it'll be huge. And so I emailed Perez and I introduced him to Evan Williams and I said, you should join, because Perez was, you know, the king of the hill at that point. He was TMZ. And he was like, how much will I get paid and why would I do this? Why would I send people to Twitter? Now, obviously, Perez is very involved. And so that's what you'll see happen, is something will flip at Medium where people who are skeptics are like, well, you know, President Obama put something up there and this person put something up there and this person put something. I should put my stuff up there, right? So it's a brilliant strategy. And I think there's so many different ways to monetize right now, but it's confusing to people because they see the New York Times laying people off or people having a hard time. You know, those people have had 10, 20 years to figure it out. They kind of haven't, and they're all shutting down or having problems. They kind of deserve to have problems because they're so slow and they didn't really react fast enough. So we really shouldn't worry about that in my mind. There should be no protectionism. All these local newspapers going away is a good thing because those people were largely incompetent. They couldn't figure out how to make this transition to the new medium, and they're going to give people like Circa or Medium or The Information a chance to take over. And that's the exciting thing for me. I'm an investor in Circa as well, so full disclosure there. But I think watching The Information, and Jessica started her own publication, watching Circa, watching Medium, and then watching Kara Swisher start her own publication, Rafat Ali, who used to work for me and did paid content, now starting his second publication, Skift. This is the golden era where journalists don't need publishers. They don't need all this infrastructure. The Information was started with almost no money. And then you just have the reputation of these stellar journalists at The Information. And how much money did they collect? They have thousands of subscribers already. At $400 a year, The Information's making millions of dollars. They'll easily get to profitability. And the people who work there and who run it, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this, Amir, is like, what is their goal? What is their end game? Their end game is to do great journalism. Their end game is not to have a big fucking building in Manhattan and, you know, big salaries for the heads and have all these fat cats making money at the New York Times or whatever publication. They just want to do great journalism and keep it light. This is the golden era. So it's never been better.
Speaking of a big fucking building in Manhattan, Bloomberg.
I knew I was here as the token traditional media.
But I got to say, Jason, I really like what you're saying, and I tell a lot of the young kids coming out of school and interviewing that this is a golden era as well, with new companies coming and old companies. When I started at USA Today 2 years ago, it was the 30th anniversary of USA Today. And we looked back and at who was big now that wasn't there 30 years ago, right? Bloomberg. CNN had just started 30 years ago. The Times and the Journal were there, but almost nobody else was, right? And so media, like technology, maybe not as fast, but like it, tends to flip over every half a generation or so. And so there's always lots of opportunity. Pui-Wing, I want to get to you, though, because Bloomberg is a great example of something that's doing two things. It's doing fast journalism, right, which we know on the internet is what people want. It's doing deep journalism, which we have begun to learn through traffic metrics is also what people want. How can you do both at the same time and give them both the same quality?
You just have to juggle a lot of balls. I always tell reporters, look, you have to be on two tracks. You've got to be on top of the news. you've got to be breaking news, but you've also got to be doing enterprise journalism at the same time. The stories that people don't want to tell you, the stories that shed light and surprise people, the stories that people didn't know that they wanted to read. You just have to spend your time and allocate your time that way.
Is speed more important than?
Accuracy is the most important. Always.
All right.
And that gets to the question of the quality of journalism, I think, that we're sort of not talking about so much right now. I think it's very interesting to hear what Jason said about this being a golden age, and I certainly think that's true in terms of the experimentation that's going on. I think it's very interesting that this panel of journalists, these three guys here, are interested in the quality of journalism, but I really wonder if that is the norm or the exception to the rule. And I wonder if there are other outlets that are not represented here that may have some different perspective about the types of content that are out there.
It's interesting where everyone talks about quality journalism, and then everyone seems to have their own perception about what it is. Does it impact and cause change? Is it a good narrative?
Is it check facts?
Something fast? Is it what?
Is it check facts?
Is it check facts?
I mean, you don't have TechCrunch on the panel here, but I mean, like TechCrunch wrote a story about a company getting bought by Google for $600 million that they got as a press release. They never called Google, right? I mean, and that's the publication of record. I mean, this is why I think it's confusing for people. They look at TechCrunch and think, oh my God, that's the publication of record. And they literally don't call Google on an acquisition story because they're so desperate to be first that they don't want to pick up the phone and call anybody, and they're lazy, and they're young kids who don't know what they're doing with no mentorship, right? And so it takes time for these publications to shake out, I think, but that's what we're in the process of. And I think one of the most interesting trends is fake it till you make it. If you look at something like Huffington Post and Business Insider and even BuzzFeed, those were schlocky SEO, social media grabbing garbage for a large portion of their lives. And then BuzzFeed was like, you know what, we're going to take these listicles, and now that we're making a shit ton of money, let's hire some really good journalists from the New York Times and let them do whatever they want. And then Business Insider, 9 of 10 of their stories are stolen from the Wall Street Journal or The Information, and they'll make 15 stories out of one Elon Musk or Marissa Mayer feature story behind a paywall. And then they do 1 out of 20 that they actually is original journalism. So there's a very interesting, like, competitive landscape that I think we should talk about, which is you have people going fast and lying in headlines and being purposefully deceptive, and they get rewarded with more clicks and more traffic. And if they take your story that you wrote and then you broke on YouTube and they break it into 5 pieces, they get all the traffic, right?
Right, the Daily Mail being a great example
so
of that.
does that,
right?
How does that fit into your narrative of this being the golden age of journalism, if that sort of stuff is happening?
Some people are stealing the gold. Some gold stealing going on.
Amir, talk to me a little bit about the paywall concept, right? Because what you guys have created is a network of very specialist, affluent readers who want exactly what you're, and expect exactly what you're delivering. It's not a broad-based concept, and therefore you're able to charge more for it. So, but how do you measure the quality?
I think it's actually very broad-based. I mean, we have subscribers in like 45 countries around the world, and technology companies are disrupting every industry. So what we're writing about, I mean, our total addressable market is no different than the Wall Street Journals or Bloomberg's, frankly. What I was going to say earlier is when we get aggregated, it's actually helpful to us, and it drives subscriptions for us. And there's actually probably ways that we can partner with aggregators and do interesting things. I actually, in terms of the question of the golden age, I think at some point you should answer the question of whether it's a golden age for local journalism. I grew up in a small town. I grew up near Des Moines Register, Gannett, right? So I'm really curious your views on whether we can, because I don't think we're in a golden age for local journalism. I think it's still bloodbath period. So I'd love for you to answer that. But as far as what we're doing, everyone sort of talks about us as a new model, a new thing. Oh my God, subscription. Oh wow. It's actually a very old thing. And the way we monetize content is the way content's always been monetized. It's no different than the Wall Street Journal or the FT or the Economist or HBO. So So I actually think what we're doing is a tried and true method. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. It's nice not to have to worry about page views and feel like you're in a chase or in a race. I mean, you think about, Huffington Post grew at an amazing trajectory, and then came Business Insider, and then suddenly BuzzFeed's growing even faster, and Upworthy's growing even faster, and who knows what's going to happen with Vox and some of the others. So it's really nice and liberating not to have to worry about that rat race. It's been really, really fun.
At some point, for the 45 countries are people who are like-minded and have the money that they want to read the content that you're providing. That's your locality, right? At some point, does that market stop, though?
I don't see why. Again, I think we can write content that's relevant to such a wide array of people in the business community, and the business community is massive. So I think it's a really huge opportunity.
I've had a lot of developers work for me over the years, and I can tell you that one of the most contentious issues, and developers are not an easy bunch to manage. We all know that. It's herding cats, right? You got these supremely intelligent people who are supremely in demand. They can work anywhere they want. You have to treat them properly. And when they have a hot button issue, you have to attack it and make sure that it's very buttoned up, because you want to keep your developers happy, because you want to keep your product moving, right? And the most difficult part for a lot of developers about their job is this idea of being on duty, what they call PagerDuty. And there is a great product called PagerDuty that a ton of important companies use, like Path, Slack, Panasonic, Airbnb, New Relic, Pinterest, and HipChat. They all use, Atlassian, HipChat, they all use PagerDuty. Now, what does it do? It takes all of the signaling from all the different services out there, like New Relic. It normalizes them, puts them into one dashboard, and it only alerts the people who are supposed to know about those problems with your servers or your transport layer or whatever it is. And it pays for itself because it keeps developers happy. I mean, you don't want to lose a developer because they were on PagerDuty and they got woken up or they got pulled out of their child's, soccer game unnecessarily. And to roll your own monitoring system would take you a full-time developer. So if you want to waste one of the precious developers you have to try to recreate PagerDuty, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a fraction of the value you can get for a fraction of that cost. In other words, you'd be crazy to try to do this yourself. And actually, the folks over at Chartbeat, which I was the first investor in Chartbeat, use the product, and here's what they say. PagerDuty gives Chartbeat one central place to send critical alerts. We now have a simple, easy process for on-call scheduling. And you want to make it simple and easy because I've seen it, developers will quit over this issue. And PagerDuty will keep your developers from quitting over this issue and will make life super simple for everybody involved. No drama. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at pagerduty.com/twist. pagerduty.com/twist. And they're going to send you a free t-shirt when you get your first alert in the system. So go ahead and sign up at pagerduty.com/twist, and everybody say thank you at PagerDuty on Twitter for them sponsoring independent media like This Week in Startups. We couldn't do it without their help. Thanks again to our friends at PagerDuty. Let's get back to the program.
You've worked both at subscription, Bloomberg, and Wall Street Journal, which is both, right? Now, when I left Bloomberg 17 years ago, they had 200,000 subscribers. Today they have 300,000 subscribers, right? So it's not exactly doubling every year, right? They're all good subscribers and high-paying subscribers. How do you think the business model is going to play out? Is it a hybrid of subscription for premium and wide stuff or not?
I think the main thing about Bloomberg and news is that news is not a business in the sense that they don't care about making a profit on news. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. And it's a cost center for the company, and it always will be, and they don't care.
Because they're a technology company.
They're wrapping news into this offering that has data and various other things, so
in a model like that,
they don't have to make money on news.
In a model like that, can you do quality journalism?
Absolutely.
I think people are confusing exactly how much all this costs. I mean, if the information was paying $100,000 per journalist all in, I'm just picking a number out of the air, which might be low for this area. That's 250 subscriptions at $400 each. Amir is going to be able to get himself 5 subscribers a week, or over 2 years, get 2.5 subscribers a week. And when it hits whatever number of subscribers, it'll break even. And you just think about any beat in the world. There's almost every beat in the world has 1,000 people who would pay $100 a year or $200 a year. You don't need everybody to pay that. And so if you can keep the company light and nimble without a lot of overhead and have the highest quality journalists, you're going to do amazing. So somebody like Bill Simmons, who has been crushing it, but who's getting crushed by ESPN, some investor yesterday, Satya Patel from Homebrew, was like, hey, Bill Simmons, I will invest $1 million if you start a new brand of venture money. And I replied, and I was like, I'll put $1 million in. Now there's $2 million. Like, this might happen. Where like there's another VC who wants to do it. So he might just get $3 million at a $10 million valuation to start a publication, keep it small, and it's going to be a big winner's game, right? So just because of globalization, this whole idea that we need local newspapers, 80% of what the local newspapers did was do national coverage that was redundant, right? Or 50% was redundant, some percentage. And it was unnecessary, and they were big overhead. You don't need more than one great journalist or two great journalists to cover any sports team. And there's enough out there in terms of crowdfunding to do it. So what we're seeing is the efficiency of Instagram having 15 employees work on a product that's used by 100 million people at the time. We're seeing that in journalism. And it's really fucking scary, especially to the 9 out of 10 journalists who actually aren't that good or competitive at what they do. But the top people, they're going to be disproportionately rewarded. What do you think David Poe got to go to Yahoo? $500,000, $1 million? Like, and what did Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher get? They got $10 million to start their own publication. This is becoming a star journalism field. And it's going to get more and more like that. And these star journalists are going to be able to bring in tens of millions of dollars each a year.
For themselves, right?
So I just want to follow up on that real quick and say, so what's the role of brand in that? I mean, you think about the sort of the center of gravity of publishing has been brands for, 100 years. Are we now at a point where the center of gravity is the personality?
100%. I mean, the D conference at Wall Street Journal was Walt and Kara Swisher. They couldn't come to terms with Rupert. And then Recode the next year was every single person who went to the previous one. And it didn't skip a beat. So yes, everybody will leave with the current folks, unless you have, a brand that gets so strong like Wired that can transcend, or group journalism like Boing Boing. If any one of the 5 members of Boing Boing left, it would probably still go. But if you look at Engadget, I was able to build Engadget so quickly because I stole Peter Rojas from Nick Denton at Gizmodo and made him a partner in the business. Then you had Jim Bankoff, who bought Engadget and Weblogs Inc., create Vox with my playbook, just stole the playbook, and then stole the team. He went, took my playbook, and took my team from Engadget to create The Verge. No originality, no thank you, Jason. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter about it, but not even a fucking phone call, Jim? I mean, you steal the whole, it's just a little bit crazy.
So it sounds like it's becoming more and more like Wall Street, where you're stealing trading teams of stars. You're paying them a ton of money to do their work for a small segment, right? One of my financial columnists at MarketWatch used to work in a subscription service that cost $30,000 a year. He had 500 clients. One of those hedge fund clients said, I'll just give you $1 million a year, just write for me. Is he a journalist? Right? And he's an analyst, right? He's working for that guy, right? So I'm trying to find a model here that works both for the star model that works for the subscribers and works for a wider audience and goes to the point of brand that you were talking about, Evan. And I'm not sure that we're there yet. Amir, to your question on local, it's not a golden age for local. It's and to what Jason was saying, they're trying to be everything to everybody when really what people want from local is the high school sports scores, who got arrested last night, what's going on in the city hall and stuff like that, and a watchdog for local government, right? And so we're trying to find ways around that. At Gannett, we're doing some interesting stuff where USA Today is taking over the international and national coverage, and those guys are working on the local, and it's had some success, which has been good. But it's certainly not a golden age, and no one's really cracked the local thing digitally yet. Patch, right? None of that has really worked yet.
What I was just going to say is, you've got this, like I think Precept was saying that, the news a business. Even when you think about newspapers and the way they package up, and commercialize the package, people are selling into special advertising sections, all that's where the money is made. You're not making your money from advertisers, at least off the front page. It's always been a loss leader in many businesses. CNN news is a loss leader. The networks, news is a loss leader. These are areas where you build up reputation, and there's always been a willingness to invest and pursue that for its own sake, and for reputation and for other reasons that it comes along. Actually, selling the news is hard, and in fact, maybe there's even like a contradiction there. That if you're going to be complicit with sponsorship, sponsors and advertisers in terms of producing news, it's kind of hard to call it news. So it feels like the separation there is: are we going to wind up in a place where the news is really supported by nonprofits? The Intercept, Pierre Omidar's operation is a nonprofit. Is that the future of investigative independent news versus is there a commercial version of that?
I was just going to say that so much of news is commoditized, and there's so many resources being wasted on repeating stories that are already out there. So I think with what we do, we think that if we just focus on creating value for our readers and only that, we can sell the news. Absolutely. Easily. And that's what we do. I mean, even at the Journal, which is a great place, nothing against it, but it used to be that you picked up the Journal and everything in there was, I didn't know that. Wow. Because people would spend a few days on these stories or a few months on these stories. It was sort of a deeper read. And then it changed, and some would argue that it was necessary to change, and it's been good and has prolonged the paper and allowed it to grow. But as a reporter, you end up spending a lot more time, focusing on breaking news as opposed to focusing on the enterprising stories that you really want to do and that actually drive value. So literally in the past 10 months, I've probably been more productive than I was, in the prior 3 years. And I was pretty productive in the prior 3 years. So that's saying a lot. But I think all of us are, because we really just focus on that quality.
So Pui-Wing, can you build a multimedia business that way? We're busy people.
Which way?
We're focusing on just adding value all the time, right? We're busy people, right? When we're done here, I'm going to check my app to see how the Giants are doing. I want to know what's going on. When I wake up in the morning, I want to know what happened overnight. How do you address that and get me to keep coming back as a customer and still give me the added value?
I mean, I think that's a better question for Amir, and the information that is trying to only give value-added journalism, right? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, people, there are so many easy ways to get the basics and what you need. There's no reason for us to provide that. And, we're just going into people's email boxes and saying, hey, we've got this cool thing. You want to check it out? And we just become part of that flow of information. So yeah, but there's no reason for us to have to repeat it and to be a comprehensive source, because they're getting this stuff, from everywhere else.
So can you build the business? How is the business?
The business is great because we're focusing on telling people things they didn't know, and once they get a taste of that, they want to come back. And it's been interesting because we now have this. First of all, we're building a community. We haven't really talked about building community online, which certainly people on YouTube have done very, very well, and many other places. But it's not just having a personality. It's about building a community. Talking about the Giants earlier, there's a guy who writes McCoveyChronicles.com. It's part of SB Nation. Amazing community. I keep telling him all the time he can monetize so much better than he does today. He does it with advertising through SB Nation, but he could charge people $10 a month, and they would pay. I would pay. I'd pay a lot more. So we're creating this community of people who are finding that the information we're giving them is becoming indispensable or something that they didn't know before, and at the very least makes them a lot smarter at the cocktail party when they can tell somebody something about Google or Apple or eBay or anyone else, but before it sort of gets out and becomes commoditized. So building community is very important, and we have this feedback loop where you get subscribers who pay for something, and they're like, they become invested in it. And they not only want it to succeed, but they have a lot to say. They want to hold you up to higher standards. So we have this great feedback loop where I just wrote, a long article today about comparing Google's handling of the Android operating system and Microsoft's handling of the Windows operating system in the 90s. There are a lot of overlaps, and it's going to be a lot of antitrust activity coming up soon. And immediately I get emails from subscribers, people who I would never have heard from previously, but because they have this connection, that's actually at the core of what we do. So we want to expand. We want to have a lot of subscribers, millions. But at the very core, the thing that's going to propel us is having that core group, that core community that is with us and helps us, and we go from there.
Evan, I'm going to open it up to the crowd after this to let them ask some questions, but I want to let you get your point across. But I want to ask you one last thing after your point. Can you tell us who you think out here in Silicon Valley is doing it right, besides Medium?
Sure. First, I just want to say I think that's totally right. I mean, the fact that you have somebody who pays you to get your publication is the strongest signal of commitment to that, and there's so much more behind that you can leverage. So the payment is that helps you make your business go, but the commitment, the fact that the reader that you have is your reader, which is not actually transparent to anybody who runs a publication on the internet. The people who come to your website, it is a huge confusion. Those people, 90% of them or 99% of them are not your reader. They were referred through Facebook or from some other referrer, and they're not an engaged, I chose you. They may not even know your brand while they're reading your story. They just know that it showed up in their stream and somebody recommended it. So payment is back to the original proposition that we actually have readers, which is an amazing thing to have. So that's an awesome asset. I don't know if there's anything to respond to that, but in answer to your question about who's doing it right, I think that in the Silicon Valley, I'm not so sure. I think that the media brands that I follow and I pay real close attention to right now are Vice, Vox, BuzzFeed.
Jason?
Oh, who's doing it right here?
Yeah.
Gosh. Obviously, I think of individuals, right? So Peter Kafka does a great job covering media, which I care about, or Kara Swisher, covers topics like, what's that? Covers Yahoo really well. She's actually on the board. People don't realize that's how she gets all the scoop. She's actually literally a board member. So I like sort of individuals, in terms of over brands. But I do think Pando Daily has, started to, hit its stride a little bit with the investigative journalism. Still a little ways to go. Recode is incredibly solid. TechCrunch is horrible. Obviously, they've totally lost their way. And the information is great. I read almost everything that comes out of there. Vox is okay. I think Curbed was really good. I was going to mention before in terms of who didn't make it work. If you look at Vox and you look at Patch, you could really do a great business school study on how execution matters. In one, there was no editorial person in charge, and you really have to have an editor in charge of an editorial product, or else it eventually will go to shit. That's what's happening with TechCrunch, right? There's nobody there in charge. It's like AOL's in charge, right? Tim Armstrong's in charge. He's a sales guy. You look at Patch, Tim Armstrong's inside. I'm not mean to dog Tim Armstrong, but Patch was a disaster because there's nobody in charge who can look at a website and say, you know what? This is misspelled. There's a comma missing. This story is boring. Where's the story on this, right? There's no editor who can look at something and say good or bad. Nobody who's got a palate for journalism. But Curbed, Lockhart Steele, he cut his teeth working under Nick Denton. And Nick Denton is an editorial savant. He knows just intrinsically what works and what doesn't. He can build a brand. So because he had to work under that maniac, when he did Curbed, it came out fantastic. Curbed crushed it on a local basis because it covered what people cared about, the price of their home, where they went to eat, and they worked backwards from those issues. And actually, Mark Cuban, myself, and Nick Denton are investing in a former Gawker alumni, but it's not announced yet, but we closed the deal. who's going to do a local play in a couple of cities that will be around investigative journalism. We may all lose our money, but I do think that that will be an amazing space, and it will work, because what people haven't realized is small amounts of donations are working. So if you look at something like Patreon, which is giving like $1 every time somebody releases a video on YouTube, some of those people are making $1,000, $2,000 a video. That same phenomenon will come to journalism and will come to writing, where you'll have 1,000 people who will pay $1 to a journalist. Maybe Medium will get there first, maybe some other person. But 100,000 people will read them. So whoever this journalist is that's doing the Giants blog, I have one too, Posting and Toasting in New York. I would pay Posting and Toasting, 25 cents or 50 cents for each blog post. I would definitely do that. And you don't need everybody to pay. That's the great thing about this. People are wildly overthinking the space because they have the old structures of cost, which has management and middle layers. Patch had so many managers and so many salespeople. And when I ask you, who is the editor-in-chief of Patch?
No idea.
Nobody has any idea. You're all PR people, right? This is all Edelman people. Does anybody here from Edelman tell me who the editor-in-chief is of Patch? Or anybody know anybody who ever worked at some great journalist? Like, who's the editor-in-chief of The Information? Okay. Thank you.
All right.
So you can just answer these questions.
Very good point. So on that, let's open it up to the audience. We got about 15, 20 minutes left. Question over here.
Coming in, I expected to hear a lot about the separation or the lack of separation between editorial and publishing, and we haven't talked very much about that. So I'm curious to hear if editorial independence is dead, or if not, why?
That's a great question.
I'll jump on that. I don't think editorial independence is dead. I think people are paying for attention. It's actually in incredible demand. People are looking for authentic, original voices. That's what the audience, brands, advertisers, sponsorship, all that stuff is going to follow attention. So you can try to cook it up. You can try to fake it. You can do whatever you do to pump it up. Put water in the chicken. At the end of the day, people are going to move to the places where there are authentic, interesting voices, where there's trusted source of information, and all of the people with money who are trying to rent and buy their way into those networks are going to follow where that signal is strongest. So people who rent out their networks and cheapen those networks and sell them off, that's a short-term play. You're capitalizing over the next 12 months to 2 years, and it's going to be gone. And remember demand media. Those kinds of plays are short-lived. People who build real engaged audiences have a value prop that they can sell to anybody for a really long time.
There are two really important trends there. One is people are being very deceptive about what's an ad and what's not. So if you go on BuzzFeed, when you're on that main page and you read down, I guarantee you if somebody did a study, some large double-digit percentage of people would not know they clicked on a sponsored post. So let's put that there. But that's also the truth for Google, which nobody really wants to talk about. When you look at Google ads and they keep changing the design, the reason they're changing the design is so you click on it without knowing it's an ad. And they've done studies outside of Google where it's absolutely true that Google is deceiving the audience as to what's an ad. And in fact, Google spent years explaining to publications how to make the ads look like content. And then they penalized the companies like eHow for having too many Google ads on the page. Literally one group was telling them, make the links the same font and header size as your heads and subheads in your article so that people will get deceived and click on it. And then the search team came along and said, yeah, you're deceiving users. We're going to lower your rank. It was a great fiasco. So the FTC will look into that at some point, Amir, and smack down maybe people doing deceptive stuff. But the other piece that's great is brands are becoming great storytellers and making great content. Some of the largest videos ever on YouTube are ads like the space jump. Let's see if this person dies coming down from space in a Red Bull suit, right? And he almost died. And that was a $10 million production that rivals anything Discovery Channel did that year, so much so that the Discovery Channel was so pissed off that they didn't have that they sent a guy whose grandfather died walking on a high wire across the Grand Canyon to try to have him die on TV. and got a massive amount of coverage for that on YouTube and other places. So the brands are getting very sophisticated about making great content, which is good for users too. They should be sophisticated in it, but it's that deception part is the part that people don't like. But journalists like us, the old school people, who are all going to be dead soon, so don't worry about it, they were offended by the fact that the ads look like content. That's offensive to old journalists. To young journalists and young people, they don't care. They don't know, young people don't know what the word selling out means. When you say to a young person selling out, they're like, awesome, they got paid. They're like, no. In the 70s and 80s, selling out meant you were a dick. Like, that sucks to sell out. You don't sell out to the man. You would never take Pepsi as a corporate sponsor. Now it's like, Nicki Minaj got Pepsi to sponsor her tour? Yeah, she got paid, right? It's a different mindset. And they assume, young people assume that everything is bought and paid for. They don't assume, and they don't trust media. So there's like a whole nother overarching generational thing where the expectation is, of course, the New York Times is in on the take. Of course, CNN's getting paid by somebody. Even if it's not true, they just assume that, and they've already moved on.
I would say editorial independence is certainly not dead, and that readers do gravitate to the brands or people that they consider more independent. But the lines are obviously more blurred than they were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's challenging, and it's created the confusion that Jason talks about. And so that's why it's important that the editors and the journalists do their best to uphold that independence as much as they can, because it's that integrity and that independence that creates the attraction that the readers ultimately have to the journalism.
I would also say that the transparency in the system is much greater than it has been. The ability for people to call out and point to the conflicts that exist is probably better than ever. I think overall net, we're in a better place in terms of where journalism stands in terms of the transparency of how stuff gets made and who's paying for it and all that. I mean, deception aside, I mean, people intentionally are going to try to confuse you, but there's people out there who are paying attention. They write about it on their blogs. They point to it, and stuff gets circulated. It gets called out, and the loop gets closed way faster in the digital, internet connected, smartphone in your pocket age than it did 20 years ago. And anybody's got misconceptions about the pristine quality of journalism prior to the internet has got to read a little history.
Get another question in over here, sir.
Hi, I'm Joshua Johnson, the morning newscaster for KQED Public Radio, an editorially independent organization and a local news organization that's doing quite well.
All right.
Listen to that voice. That's a voice.
But my question's not about that, because I know we're doing all right. My question is about freemium models, particularly as it relates to non-written journalism, multimedia, audio, video. Separate from my work with KQED, I'm working on a podcast for entrepreneurs called Rocket Fuel Radio. And I'm interested in the prospect of funding that through a freemium model with some content that's more general interest, and then people who can subscribe for more content that is for a core audience. And that kind of flows out of my background in public media that says that we'd rather make media for the audience rather than media for the advertisers. And serving an audience deeply while keeping a door open to everybody is the way to make the best quality content. What have you seen in terms of freemium models with multimedia that works? What doesn't work? Is no one piercing the veil? Has no one tried?
There's two great people to look at. One is Tim Ferriss, and the other is Andrew Warner. So I do a podcast this week in startups, which is free. I've done it for 5 years. It's the largest startup podcast in the world now, over 100,000 downloads. It does $500,000 a year in revenue. And in fact, they're taping it right now. It's got an Emmy Award-winning producer, Jackie, right there, and a true artist, Jacob, who's the technical producer. There are 4 full-time people who work on it. Took me 5 years to get there, lost money for the first 2. So you have to invest a lot of time and effort. I'm 475 episodes in. I mean, it is a grind. But what Andrew Warner did was he took my same guests, he asked them 5 questions over the phone, and he asked them questions about growing your business, and he charges $25 a month for it. And I think he makes more money than I do. So it absolutely will work. And Tim Ferriss is another great example of that. He's got all these Tim Ferriss fan clubs and money. I mean, that guy just he writes down a phone number on a piece of paper and people will pay for it. I mean, anytime a pen, like when he scribbles to get the ink out of the pen, they'll pay for that. So he's got such a great brand around it. So you have to have a brand that's notable, but paid works. in that space. And Patreon is something to look at. And Patreon's working really well. And I'm an investor in another company that's not announced yet that is doing a Patreon type thing for journalists that I'll let you know about afterwards.
Just to follow up on that, I hear you when you say that. I hear you when you say that you had to struggle at it for a while and so on. But I'm a professional, and I'm really, really good at interviewing people. I've been pounding on my craft for 10 years. Like
Oh yeah, so I don't mean on the how good you are.
What I'm asking is, at what point does it go beyond just the business model and the style, and the content drives it all? Where does that line live?
It's really about audience and attention. One of the hard things now is attention. So there are so many options for people, and I meet people who I've known for 10 years, and I'm like, hey, you should come on my podcast. And they go, you have a podcast? I'm like, yeah, I have a podcast. I've done 475 episodes. I tweet about it every week. You follow me on Twitter. Did you never see the link or email? Like, people are so busy now. They don't know anything. Like, Amir, you meet people and you told them you work for the information, and then they're like, what do you do now? Like, people are just so busy. So getting attention and having that funnel going is critical. And buying traffic is actually a great way to do it now too, and buying a little bit of attention from specific targeted audiences on Twitter and Facebook, which is really what the sort of scientists of content did, which are really the BuzzFeeds and Upworthys of the world. They over-engineered it. It became a little Frankenstein at the Upworthy case, where they just spent too much money, and then Facebook was like, enough of your nonsense, you're polluting the feeds. But BuzzFeed did a lot of that, where they would do 5 headlines, buy ads on Twitter, buy ads on Facebook, see which ones got the most likes, and then have those and promote them. I hate that shit. I mean, I just think that's terrible. But you have to get people's attention. That's the key. Can you get people's attention? But back to your question about the ads, et cetera. One of the things, and this really relates to Medium, is, and you were talking before about how like people have this like, oh, journalists were doing such a great job previously. And then you have someone like Elon Musk, who, when the New York Times kind of lied about their test drive, was like, oh, but I happen to have the data here, and you didn't actually fully charge, and you drove the car around the block 10 times, and so your data wasn't accurate. And then the ombudsman at the New York Times was like, yeah, our data was not accurate, and we're sorry. Like, that shit was going on the whole time. The only difference is Elon Musk has 1 million followers on Twitter, and the journalist has 20. So now this, the journalists used to have so much power over the subjects, and it's gone now. And the subjects, when they learn how to write, or they hire a ghostwriter, holy shit, do they become powerful.
They lie a lot too.
Yeah.
There's just a flat out lies, and they get away with it because the blogosphere ecosystem will eat it up. So I wrote a very long article about an initiative at Verizon, 100% true, 100% true. Verizon came out and said it wasn't true, and they got away with it. And I had to sort of fight uphill to get bloggers to like get my side of the story or whatever. So that's actually a really big problem right now. Square has been accused of this as well, in responding to some reports, not yesterday, but one that the Journal did a little while back. Anyway, that's a big problem for our industry right now. Is these corporate PR departments have become
and these companies have become media companies in their own right,
exactly.
So they can fight back. What Jason was saying, 6 years ago, USA Today broke the story that the government, that the NSA was spying on people through their phones, and that day that they broke the story, phone company shares plunged. Phone companies came out, and a concerted effort said not true, denied it. And they came back, and then people started questioning, well, maybe the story's not right, or editors started questioning whether they did the journalism right, and it just faded away. 2 years ago, Edward Snowden proves it. Washington Post and Guardian break it, and it is true. And finally, they get caught, but they were able to deflect it for all those years. All right, let's move on. We got time for a few more questions. Spencer.
Yeah, hi, I'm Spencer Soper. I'm with Bloomberg. I have a question for Jason. Hi, Jason. Come from a newspaper background. You mentioned that the people at big newspapers are incompetent. People at small newspapers are incompetent.
A lot of incompetence.
Yeah. Warren Buffett's invested a lot of money in smaller local newspapers. Is he incompetent, or is he maybe just not at your level of competence?
In this case, he's making a huge mistake, and Sam Zell made that same mistake. These are old people who have an affinity for those print publications. So yes, huge mistake in that case, and everything else that Warren Buffett's a genius. The problem with these small newspapers is people love them and they cherish them but those people are old and dying. And the people you mentioned are old and dying. The young people do not care about local newspapers. They did not grow up with that habit. They're growing up looking on Twitter, and their idea of journalism is following, is it Anton French for Ferguson, who's like does this incredible coverage? Like for them, that's journalism. The guy in the street taking pictures and updating them every 15 minutes. Like they have a different perception of what this is. So yeah, these people are like buying old brands. You might be able to take those old brands and make them online and get rid of all the management structures. Because if you think about at the information, I would guess 90 cents of every dollar they spend goes into a story. There's probably 10 cents in overhead for every story, maybe 20 at the max. At a newspaper, like a local newspaper, it is the exact opposite. I would guess 10 or 20 cents goes into the story, and 80 cents goes into the receptionist, the manager, the managing editor who hasn't written shit in years and is drunk, this person, that person. Nobody is doing any work at those big old publications. At these young, nimble publications, you can't work there unless you file. And that was the thing that made Gawker and Weblogs Inc. and the blogging companies do so well. All we did was blog. We didn't even have an office. We had no overhead. So every dollar went into editorial. We could compete so much faster.
All right. Couple more questions in the back there.
Yeah, so I'd like to hear what you think the next 5 years looks like. Is the total addressable market, can it continue growing? Which platforms are going to be the ones that actually win out?
Want to take that one?
Well, I don't know, frankly. It's, I've been in the business 20 some years. Things are very, very, very different. I remember when the Wall Street Journal was this thick and times were really good and then times were really not. And there were cuts, and more cuts. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on right now. I don't know as much about whether things actually make money with some of these new online publications. It's exciting, some of the voices. It's exciting to see that people are trying different things, but I wonder if they are actually sticking. I mean, I look at a publication like Recode, and most of the money is made from a conference or conferences. And people are not really paying for the content. I mean, the advertising doesn't pay for the content. So I wonder. And I'm sure these guys probably do know. And I'm just
I'll tell you what I think. I think the freemium model will not be the big winner in the next 5 years. I don't think it is a successful funnel into a subscription service. I think there will be services like Bloomberg and ND Information that have a specific talent that they really do better than anybody else that will drive a specific audience. And there will be broad-based news organizations that will continue to look for ways to do it. To me, I've always thought that, and maybe it was the years I spent at Bloomberg, that the folks who can command the data that's out there and can tell interesting, unique stories with personality based on the data are creating something, to Amir's point, that's new, that's added value, that is available there, but it's being put together by somebody whose job it is to find that data and tell a story. And I think we're going to see more of that coming out. All right, time for one more. Alec, what do you think? Two more? One more. Yes, in the back there.
I have a quick question. Amir, you mentioned aggregators earlier. And I remember I probably went to Medium probably 10 to 20 times before I actually thought to myself, what is this Medium thing? I'm going to go check it out. Like I read probably 10 or 20 stories through aggregators and sharing. I mean, like things like NextDraft and other aggregators that bring people to your site, on a one-off basis. And you mentioned you have partnerships with them. What do you see as the future of the way you work with aggregators? Is it something that you think is very valuable, or is it something that brings people once and they go away without even really knowing where they were? They read a good story and went away again.
You're asking me about I was just going to say about aggregators that they're actually very crucial more than ever because there's so much crap out there. And the biggest problem that I face and a lot of our subscribers face is their time being wasted. So a lot of them get pretty disgusted with trying to find good information, and there's good information everywhere, by the way. Every publication that we've talked about, even the ones that Jason hates, they put out good stuff. Kim Mike Cutler writes about, this San Francisco, real estate scene and what's happening here. She's great. But it's really hard to get good information. So that's why we don't want to waste anyone's time. We just want to create a safe haven. It's all quality. If they go there, they're not going to get mad at us. But aggregators are very crucial. And Jason just created an aggregator called Inside that you should check out and download. There's a one called Redef from Jason Hirschhorn. It's actually very important if they do a good job. They serve a very big purpose. Sorry, I don't know if that's answering the question, but
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Drudge. I mean, Slashdot, Reddit, Dig, on and on and on. There's a million of these people. FARC. I mean, the nature of the internet to the start was we're going to share links. Links. That is the basis of the World Wide Web. And it's saying I can share a link. So people who started blogging started by sharing links. They were aggregators. And then they started to build in their own point of view, their own reporting. But the basis of all of that stuff started with aggregation. And go back to the early days of Gawker. Gawker was aggregation plus. That was Nick Denton's thing. He said, look, we're going to aggregate the best stuff that you need to read in any given category, and then we're going to add something that nobody else has got on top. So that really works as a thing. For what we're doing at Medium, we're also an aggregator. We're an aggregator of everybody's stories and ideas. We're trying to use the platform in a new way to try to allow people to become their own curators. So you have a huge slush pile of content that is being rolled up into like a unified network. You join that network, you signal to us who you care about, whose point of view is interesting to you, what publications on that network are interesting to you, and then we start to serve that content to you. We start to sift it and give you a custom view. It's your personal curated view of the web. So that's another way to think about curation, that Twitter is curation, Facebook is curation, all these things, they're about aggregation plus curation. I think all of that stuff is that is the top layer of content. It's all been aggregated, filtered, and I think you're going to see a lot more people jumping in to try to figure out how do we make the network work to produce that curation automatically? How do we allow algorithms and automation to do the work of sifting through literally millions and millions of articles? It's a really hard problem. Human curation is probably going to win for the next who knows how long, 5 years. But at some point, the machines are going to win. And people who develop those algorithms are going to be the ones who are running the media show. All right, great stuff. Well, thank you. Oh, sure.
Sorry. It's also a question about aggregators, actually. But which, if you're thinking, kind of beyond the, but if you're thinking about, say, Twitter as an aggregator, or TechMeme, or something like The Skim, where there's a little bit of editorialization, how much is that actually taking away from, that top level news? Obviously, it's not going to take away from the deep, big stories, but how much are they competitors, frenemies?
Yeah, I tried to invest in The Skim. I wasn't able to. It's a great product. It's worth checking out. And so I can give you actual statistics on this because I have two aggregators that I run. One is called The Launch Ticker that has 850 people paying $100 a year for. And then I have Inside.com, which is relatively new, and it's an app. 60% of the people 60% of sessions wind up clicking through to a source. So if you're doing really great aggregation, what you're actually doing is making a really great table of contents with a voice. And if you do your job right, like Media Redefined, which is doing an amazing job at it, what you're actually doing is you're building a relationship with people where they're saying, I trust, back to clicks, I trust your clicks. And so over time, what happens is people open it up and they just start clicking. And then they look at the stuff. So when I get, and you probably have this happen, Amir, with Jason Hirschhorn's thing, you just open it up and start clicking. You just assume he's not going to give you bullshit. Which when you open Twitter, you assume majority of this stuff is bullshit, right? So that's, I think, going to be the huge value. That's why I'm spending so much time working on Inside, is because I think that whoever can figure that out, algorithmic humans, I think it's going to be a cyborg where the algorithms inform the humans, they become this great layer on top. And you don't need to steal the clicks because you can build a big enough business being the starting point. And that's why I fought so hard to get a domain name like inside.com so I could have inside.com/space or any other topic. I think this is going to be another layer of media that doesn't currently exist. And you can see it on YouTube, right? Because YouTube's had a lot of great formats, and that's the stand-up show. The Tosh O show is, people think they're stealing those clip shows. Those clip shows get clicked on massively in the double digits. So when you watch Tosh O or the other clip shows on, like Ray William Johnson on YouTube, they always put annotations to click to the stories. And the people who watch them go and open the bottom of it, and they open the links. And the skim is the same thing.
And the other thing I would just layer in on this is, we're all moving to mobile. Mobile is about apps. Apps, I mean, you need to have, people are not going to open 14 or 15 or 20 media apps. There's going to be one app or two apps that rule media consumption on the phone, maybe three, but that's it's going to gravitate to a winner-take-all kind of thing on the phone. I mean, Flipboard is ahead, but I think they're like weak because they don't have licenses for the full content. That stuff is, the phone is going to really define sort of the aggregation layer for media, I think, and people who can build a really awesome, engaging mobile app that puts everything that you want to read in one place and gives it to you when you want it, that is going to be the winner.
All right. Well, thank you to our panelists. Appreciate it. Good stuff here tonight. Good to see you.